I'm with Debbie Abrahams from the Labour Party. We've had over 1,500 questions, Debbie, from job seekers on reed.co.uk concerned about employment issues.
Mm-hmm.
We've chosen 10 that are most representative of the questions asked, which I'll ask you in order. The first question comes from Daniel from Leeds. He's asked, how will your party secure a Brexit deal that doesn't damage the economy or lead to jobs being moved overseas once Britain leaves the single market?
Very good question. Keir Starmer, who is the shadow Brexit secretary, has been very clear about this one. We will be prioritising both jobs and the economy as part of the Brexit negotiations. 14,000 jobs here in Oldham and 3.5 million jobs across the country are associated with EU trade. It's absolutely essential we do that. We also need to make sure within the negotiations that there is a deal, that we don't have to default on a hard Brexit, which would have huge impacts in terms of the implications for jobs.
This question is from Lydia from Brighton. What will you do to reduce the wage gap between top earners and those at the bottom?
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it, really, that since 2010 we actually see average wages haven't really increased at all if you consider inflation, whereas the CEOs of the top 100 companies have actually increased by 47%. I think there's a 150 times difference between their pay and the average workers, and we need to do something about it. We know that fairer societies do better overall when there is a narrower gap, so we've promised that we would publish the pay ratios as a way of highlighting really the differences. Hopefully that will make a difference.
This question is from Orhan from London. How would you improve job security and workers' rights for those in non-typical employment, such as Deliveroo, Uber, and those on 0 hours contracts?
Yes, that is something that has exploded over the last few years. I think 80% of the increase in employment is actually in self-employment, which includes bogus employment, and we really need to do something about that. We set up the Self-Employment Commission at the end of last year, who were doing some work around this, but particularly around making sure that we have clear legal definitions of what is employment, what is self-employment. And then we need to make sure that if you are wearing a uniform, doing a company's hours, that you have the rights protected to you in relation to that. But we also need to make sure that workers' rights are extended. We have increasingly flexible labour markets, and we need to make sure that different types of jobs are protected in the same way that mainstream jobs are.
This is from Linda from Sheffield. With the retirement age going up, what help will your party give to over 50s out of work?
I'm really proud of the education offer in our manifesto. It is we have pledged a national education service from cradle to grave, and that will be free, and that's so important. You don't get a job now for life anymore, and we need to have the opportunities for people at different stages of their life to be able to retrain. And this would be something that somebody in their later years, if they find that they have to need to retrain, that will be there for them. So important, as I say, with a changing labour market.
Our next question is from Sarah from Reading. What are your plans to improve chances for young people to acquire the necessary education, training and skills for a meaningful job in the working world?
I think young people over the last few years have been absolutely hammered. If we look at what's happened to them in terms of not just when they're at school and the cuts in education funding, but also once they've left school around education maintenance allowance, around the trebling of tuition fees. I mentioned just now about the National Education Service, which will be so important to them, but also emphasising the point that whether it's a vocational training and vocational career that people want to go into, or an academic career, that education and the support around that would be free. I think that's so important. It does put so many young people off, and we need to make sure we have the quality apprenticeships that haven't been available in the past.
Samir from London, what will you do to protect jobs from increased automation and robotics in the workplace?
I think it's going to be difficult to roll back on development, but I also think we need to recognise where we are at the moment. We are the second lowest in terms of productivity in the G7. We haven't invested in the way that we need to in our companies, and that has had a knock-on effect in terms of the wages that people can earn. We need to change that, and so we've committed to a national transformation fund, 250 billion over 10 years, which is about investing in our industries and our businesses, particularly those strategic industries that need to be developed for future jobs, and I think that's so important. So it's, yeah, we will have increased automation, but we are preparing for the new jobs of the future, and we have the funding there to secure that.
Gemma from Cambridge asks, how will you make sure that skilled migrants continue to be able to come to the UK and benefit the economy?
If we look at our NHS and our care service, we would be absolutely in a dire position, I have to say, if we didn't have our skilled clinicians from overseas. So we need to make sure that we retain their skills and their knowledge in our country. But we also need to be in a position where we're training our own workers as well to be able to take up those jobs in the future.
This is a question from Pascal from London. With a continuing gender pay gap and underrepresentation of women on boards, what will you do to counter gender discrimination in the workplace?
It is quite shocking. I have heard cases of where pregnant women have been made redundant, and because of the increase in employment tribunal fees, they haven't had the recourse that they should have to challenge that discrimination. And we know again 86% of the cuts and tax and social security changes that we've seen over the last 7 years have impacted on women. We need a stronger Equality and Human Rights Commission who can challenge this discriminatory behaviour. And as I say, we need to make sure that employment tribunals are reinstated so any discrimination can be challenged as well.
The last question, this is from Derek from Hastings. How will you stop low-cost foreign workers coming into the UK to compete for roles here, driving down wages?
We've been very clear on this, in addition to saying that we would stop the free movement of labour as part of the negotiations in terms of leaving the EU. We believe it's absolutely wrong that there are some employment agencies that are solely recruiting from the EU deliberately to undercut local labour agreements, and that needs to stop, so we would make that illegal. I know that in 2007, 1 in 7 people employed through employment agencies was from the EU, so you can just extrapolate that figure to see how it's impacting on local jobs, and we would stop it.
There we go, Grant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.